Hi everybody. I'm back again with another video. I've gotten some feedback that these are helpful, so I'm going to try to do these when I can. This is I'm going to be talking about chapter 7 in Hays and Singh, and I hope you guys have noticed that this week is very light in reading. Just one chapter, that's it, because um, this topic is so important that I think it's worth really reading closely and trying to really soak up these concepts. So, even though it's a light week, I hope that we can all really dig into this material. So, trustworthiness, specifically Hays and Singh's chapter 7. Let me make sure this is working. Okay, so trustworthiness, the essential question of this week and really of this course is, what is good research? How can we judge it? Hays and Singh start off their chapter talking about the scientific method and basically the gold standard of research, which is um, randomized control trials, really the experimental method. They point out that there's this holy trinity of good research: validity, reliability, and generalizability. And this really comes up in experimental designs. What's strange is that we haven't really studied experimental design yet, but I still think they have a good point that that's sort of what's in the air. We think about what is good research, and we think about controlled experiments, where you have randomization, people assigned randomly to two groups, and one group is a control group where nothing happens to them, and the other group is a treatment group. So in our field, maybe we would have a control group that got just treatment as usual in the clinic, and our treatment group would be getting some special intervention. And we would do a pre and post test on those groups and see, is there a difference? Did the experiment make a difference? So that's sort of the bare bones of how we usually think about judging research. The Holy Trinity, validity, refers to how well a test measures what it says it measures. So an example of that would be if I give an assessment that I think is measuring depression, but actually it's just measuring anxiety, then that's not a very valid test. And that goes back to, that really factors into experimental research, where if you're not testing what you think you're testing, then your design is not very valid. Now, internal validity has to do with the likelihood of causal relationships between variables. So I want to credit Kevin Linus with this example. When I took the class with him, he brought up this fact that researchers found that there was a crime surge, a huge spike in crime, and a huge spike in ice cream sales. So is it fair to say that ice cream causes crime, or crime causes ice cream? No. There's a confounding variable there, right? The heat. There was a heat wave, and we know that when it gets really hot outside, people go a little nuts and there's more crime. Also, when it's hot, people like to eat ice cream. So this is a great example of a threat to internal validity. There's no causal relationship between ice cream and crime, or crime and ice cream. They might correlate, they might happen at the same time, but there's no causal relationship there. So that's internal validity. External validity has to do with how the sample was selected, and the overall design, and how that does or does not lead to generalizability. An example of this would be, and this is a real example, an article that was published in the Journal of Marital and Family Therapy, where the researchers surveyed, paper and pencil survey, a group of social workers, mostly all Israeli. And there were a few marriage and family therapists in there. But they generalized their findings. In their article, they said that their findings were generalizable to all MFTs. And that was a huge jump in logic to say that this small group of Israeli social workers is representative of all marriage and family therapists. So that's a threat to external validity, having a sample that is not actually representative of your greater population of interest. So that's external validity. Reliability, as many of you probably know if you took any undergrad research or statistics class, that just refers to how stable and consistent the results of a test are. So if your test is good, if your assessment is good, you'll get the same results over and over again. It'll be pretty stable. And there's more to say about that test and retest, but we'll get there later. And generalizability is exactly what it sounds like. How able are you to sort of import those findings to other situations or other people? Yeah, stay tuned for more about this in week 10 when we really visit quantitative research. But laying the groundwork now, I guess. Okay, following the Hays and Singh chapter and going back to qualitative world, we're moving from validity, as it's conceived of in the scientific method, to validation. And they map out 4 positions that people tend to take on this, pages 192, 193, ranging from we should use the criteria that are laid out in the quantitative world, so reliability, validity, generalizability, we should use those and hold ourselves to those standards. And then ranging on the other side to that stuff doesn't apply to us at all. We need new criteria. So I would be interested for you all to sort of think about where you fall in those positions, what your gut tells you about how we should judge research, even if it's not quantitative in nature. And this actually made me think of the group, the Kendall, Kara, Lizzie group, how you guys were discussing that you felt that the field of DMT really needs quantitative research, but you might personally be more interested in doing qualitative. I wondered, this part of the book made me wonder what you guys would say about this, these 4 positions. This discussion parallels the discussion about research paradigms. So as we're going through this material, I hope you can make some connections back to week 2 when we mapped out the difference between positivism, post-positivism, the critical lens, social constructivism. This is all very connected to that, specifically in terms of the role of the researcher. Okay, trustworthiness criteria. So if we're not quantitative researchers, if we're not using the scientific method, how can we evaluate our research? How can we evaluate the research that we read? So I'm going to take you through some of the concepts. Credibility. How believable is this research? Just on like a gut level, you read an article, do you buy it? Does it seem believable? This is analogous to internal validity. So if you read a qualitative study that was talking about the lived experience of having, increased ice cream sales and also crime, would you buy that argument? Did that seem true to you? So transferability is similar to external validity. Can we import this to other situations? This is really similar to generalizability. But I wrote this quote out because I think it's so crucial. This is from page 200. Generalizability is not the goal of qualitative research, for the most part, by and large. Rather, the goal is to provide enough detailed description so that readers can make decisions about the degree to which the findings are relevant to the settings in which they work. And this is a really important idea, and this is part of the paradigm shift from quantitative to qualitative. And this came up in some of your guys' critiques, in your annotations. Some of you wrote that, one of the limitations to the study was that it had a small sample size. Now, a small sample size is um, something to critique if it's a quantitative study, but if it's a qualitative phenomenological study, sample size is irrelevant. Now, why is that? Because in phenomenology, you're looking for deep, thick description of lived experience. That does not necessitate a big sample size. I read an article about a year ago about teaching students in supervision reflexive abilities. And this article just knocked my socks off. It was so amazing. It really helped me in my journey to become a supervisor. And that had a sample size of 3. So this is about sort of shifting our lens to what's useful, what's relevant, rather than what's universal or generalizable. So that's a really key point. Whoops. Okay, dependability is like consistency of results, and this is very analogous to reliability. If I did this inquiry again, would I get similar results? Would I be in the same ballpark? I actually have a bone to pick with that because I think as a social constructionist kind of a gal, I think that your findings very well may change depending on the time and the setting and lots of other things. Kind of like you can never step in the same river twice. So I think this is a useful thing to think about, but that it's not a hard and fast rule that you would always have to have consistency of results. Replication of studies, that idea doesn't necessarily fit in a qualitative realm, depending on what paradigm you're using. Confirmability, the degree to which findings are genuine reflections of participants themselves. Are the participant voices really being honored? And there are ways to check for that. We'll get to that. So we've got these criteria: credibility, transferability, dependability, confirmability, and then I guess I thought this was really important because I made it big in red, coherence. Does the study have a consistency of epistemological perspective? Now, this is really crucial for the critiques, the annotated bibliographies. And for an example of a student who I think really paid attention to this, sorry if this will embarrass you, but Jana's annotated bibliography did a really good job of this, of identifying the research paradigm, the methodology, and the methods. And that's what I mean by coherence, a consistency of epistemological perspective. So go check out Jana's. I got permission. You can go check it out in her small group forum if you want an example of this. So guiding questions here would be, does the methodology fit the purpose? Does it make sense, the way that they went about this? Do the data collection procedures fit with the paradigm? If you're saying that you are a social constructivist and you believe in a co-constructed reality, but then you're getting your data collection by a multiple choice survey, that doesn't fit. That would be an inconsistency. Are the findings presented in a way that is congruent with the paradigm? So it's basically looking at all the pieces of a study, the research paradigm, the methodology, the methods, data collection and analysis, and seeing, are they aligned? Do they make sense? Oh, I want to go back. And just in terms of critique, if you can't really tell by reading the article, that's a problem. If the researchers don't attend to research paradigm, or if they don't even say what methodology they're using, that is just, it irks me to my core when you read an article and it just says a qualitative inquiry. It's like, well, what kind? I think that's a great way to judge the trustworthiness of a study. Are they telling you what they're doing? Are they being overt and transparent? So then these strategies of trustworthiness, I'm not going to take you through each and every one of these because I think um, that would take too long, and the book does a really good job of it. But let's look at them very briefly. How you build a case for trustworthiness is you engage in these activities. Reflexive journaling, which we talked about last week, field notes, memos. So this is how is the researcher um, working through their own material in the process of the research. So if you're doing the kind of study where you have to go spend time out in the field, you know, in a community, take notes so that you can, so you're not working 100% from memory, so that you're working with your own material, all that stuff. I think member checking is really crucial, and that's on page 206. Check back with the people that you're researching. See if they think you're on the right track. That's a great way to increase the chance of a trustworthy study. Prolonged engagement has to do more with the kinds of methodologies like ethnography, where you're trying to describe a whole culture. You know, let's say if you're trying to go, let's think about the culture of rich people who live in Silicon Valley. If you're trying to write an ethnography of that culture, a 30-minute interview is probably not going to cut it. You need to spend a long time there, become sort of a part of the culture to really get it. So that's prolonged engagement, which is similar to persistent observation. Triangulation is worth looking at in detail. There's ways of triangulating data, of triangulating analysis procedures, and the book does a really good job of covering those aspects. So what I want to highlight though is that triangulation is not about creating completeness, about confirmation. It's about creating a more complete picture. But in qualitative research, you will rarely find a researcher who's saying, this is the whole story. There's nothing left to say about this. It's just about adding more to the description. Another strategy is peer debriefing. You know, just like in clinical work, don't go it alone. Bring people in to make sure you're not going off onto your own planet. Negative case analysis is really a heuristic of keeping yourself honest. You know, if you're really building a theory towards one argument, consider the negative, consider the alternative. Thick description. This is sort of a non-negotiable in most qualitative research, that you need to describe your phenomenon deeply and thickly so that the person reading the study can make a decision, like the book says, can make a decision about whether or not the findings are relevant. And create an audit trail, paper trail, so that people can trust what you're doing. Now, for your critiques, these are the things you want to look for in the methods section. The writers should be talking about which of these things they have done and are doing, so that you can trust their study. If you read an article and nothing like this is mentioned, that's for the critique. That's a big problem. And some of that has to do with, like, they're writing a journal article, they only have 14 pages, so some stuff gets cut. But there can be a sentence that talks about, we engaged in reflexive journaling and member checking, and that's better than nothing. Okay, so that's the deal with trustworthiness. Now, I want to finish by saying that this is a radical departure from the way that most people think about evaluating research. And I'm interested to hear how this sounds to you guys. Does this sound like, as my daughter would say, are you okay with this? Does this seem like real research? I realize that this class is slanted heavily towards the qualitative just because of the sequencing, and I want to make sure that there's space for if there are any people out there who are like tried and true quantitative post positivist folks, I want to make sure there's room for you too. So um, I'm interested to hear what you guys think about these strategies of trustworthiness and how you're going to incorporate them into your own proposals. More later. Bye.